Everyone in Pittsburgh knows that we made steel for decades, and that legacy is still a living part of who we are now. But there aren't a lot of examples left of how all that history was forged. With the Cary blast furnaces, you can literally stand in the shadow of what was once cutting-edge technology. Rivers of Steel offers tours of this important National Historic Landmark, and they explain how we made iron, introduce you to the people, the workers who made it possible, and share more about the culture that sprang up to support them. Plus, they've got a special spotlight right now on how the Great Migration shaped its workforce. Learn more and book a tour at riversofsteel.com/tours. Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, Governor Josh Shapiro says he wants to fully legalize recreational cannabis, but so far, no dice. If you lived in Philly, you'd be able to zip over to Jersey or Maryland or New York and get basically anything you wanted. But until now, that hasn't been as true for Pittsburgh. Ohio has now legalized, and sales are set to start any minute now. I'm here with friend of the pod, Ed Mahan, for our semi-annual check-in about whether Pennsylvania will ever get with the program. It's Monday, June 17th. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. Ed is an investigative reporter for Spotlight PA. Y'all cover all kinds of important stuff all over the Commonwealth. Welcome back to CityCast.
Great to be here.
So let's level set. What's legal here in Pennsylvania right now?
In Pennsylvania, we have a medical program. So if you want to legally use marijuana, you have to get a doctor's permission. And then once you get the doctor's permission, you buy a card, and then you're able to purchase from dispensaries a variety of types of marijuana, including pills, oils, dry leaf, which you are not legally supposed to smoke. You can vaporize, liquids, tinctures. You can't legally buy edibles from dispensaries.
Yeah. Do we know what percentage of the state currently has a card right now?
Oh, I think it's like about 441,000 people have active cards right now. So what is Pennsylvania's population again? About 11 million, 12 million, 10 million, something like that. So a significant number.
Well, I feel like asking this question feels increasingly like Groundhog's Day. Do you think that Pennsylvania will legalize cannabis this year?
I'm not sure. I think wouldn't expect it to happen in the next few weeks. I think the advocates I've talked to think it's kind of stalled, despite the governor's support for it. People have seen other states pass it and think that would give momentum in Pennsylvania, but that hasn't really happened in the legislature. We saw New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland all legalize it without momentum really picking up. And then Ohio is legalizing it now, too, which is giving some new hope. But also, I think people are a little jaded at this point.
Yeah, I mean, just to speak for Pittsburgh, like typically we hate it when Ohio gets something that we don't. So if there was ever a moment, What are the arguments for and against legal cannabis here in Pennsylvania? And I guess I'm curious, who is for, who is against? Like, what are the divisions right now?
I mean, I think it breaks down pretty solidly Republican Democrat in Pennsylvania. There are a few exceptions, but that's still the general breakdown.
But you mean by lawmaker, not necessarily by voter?
Yeah, exactly, by lawmaker. And the Senate right now is controlled by Republicans, and they haven't taken action on marijuana legalization, even though there's a few members who support it. And the Democrats control the state house very narrowly, and there's a lot more support among that caucus for it, but we haven't seen something move out of the House. And I think we're waiting on some bills, legalization, to see some action in committee, too.
Yeah, I mean, what's the status of those bills, and I guess what would they do?
There's a couple different bills. In the Senate, there's some Republican bills that would create a legal system, legal framework for recreational marijuana. There's another bill that would sort of broaden the medical marijuana program to a significant degree, to a degree that some people think would make it quasi-recreational or more quasi-recreational than it is. And then in the House, there's some ideas floating around sort of just to broaden the program, broaden the medical program to allow those dispensaries to start selling recreational cannabis. And then there's been some ideas floated about having a state-run system, similar to our liquor stores.
No. Pennsylvania's booze situation is already famously messy. Why would we do that twice?
I not as up to speed on all of the arguments for it, but I think it's the idea that you'd have consistent regulation, you'd have the jobs. I think I'm sure Democrats like having those union jobs in the state liquor store system as well.
Well, our Governor Josh Shapiro, supports legalization. He called for it in his budget address. Does that carry any weight for any of these, decision makers at the top?
I think it does. I think the fact that he's out there publicly advocating for it, which he did in his budget, talking about how the estimates are it would bring in hundreds of millions of dollars, and that the Independent Fiscal Office has, supported those estimates. I mean, it certainly helps move the Democratic caucus. The big question is, how passionately, how much does he care about this during budget negotiations? Mm-hmm. Because, there's a lot of things people want, but how much they're willing to trade for it, to lobby for it, to argue for it, how much time they're willing to spend on it during this whole process is a big question.
I mean, our budget is technically due on June 30th, but we never make that deadline here in Pennsylvania. What are you expecting to hear out of this? Do you think deals are going to get made?
I mean, anything can happen in Harrisburg, but I would not anticipate some deal that would legalize recreational cannabis, passing out of the state budget in the next few weeks. Obviously, I could be wrong, but what I would try to anticipate is the potential for, changes, not huge changes, but potentially changes to the medical program getting passed as part of, the flurry of activity towards the end of June that happens. I mean, there's a bill from State Rep Dan Frankel to sort of increase oversight of the labs that test, the THC and the quality of cannabis products. Mm-hmm. And that's a bill to watch for, just because that, if it passed out of the House, if the Senate wants to do something with marijuana, with medical marijuana, that might be sort of an avenue that it could happen. That's sort of what I'd be watching for the next few weeks. And then if the budget doesn't pass, if the budget goes into a longer negotiation process, I would be keeping an eye on legalization over the summer into the fall to see if it gets any momentum. But I'm not expecting huge progress in the next few weeks.
Did you know there's a speakeasy on Liberty Avenue? Well, we're letting the cat out of the bag, or I guess I should say the rabbit out of the hat, because Liberty Magic is Pittsburgh's premier speakeasy theater, dedicated to the art of elevating magic. And if you've never been, there is a really fun show right now that would be a perfect entry point to what they do best. Magician and comedian Rob Zabrecky has brought his variety show, The Zabrecky Hour, to Pittsburgh, and it is just so wonderfully weird. There's deadpan comedy, song and dance, and his absurd take on mental phenomena, which may involve getting a few of his audience members involved. It is strange in a way you will never forget. The Zabrecky Hour is happening now at Liberty Magic through July 14th, and they even offer a Skeleton Key VIP experience for the best seats and an up-close encounter. You've got to check it out. That's the Zabrecky Hour at Liberty Magic through July 14th. Get your tickets at trustarts.org/magic before they disappear.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
I mean, all of these incremental changes with our medical program, I mean, as you look at what other states are doing and maybe any benefits that they're reaping from this, either, from perception from voters or revenue that's coming into the state, I mean, is it enough? Why are we just taking these itty bitty steps at a time?
Yeah, I think there are two big issues with this approach Pennsylvania's taken. I mean, I've heard from a lot of advocates that Pennsylvania has passed a lot of business-friendly actions towards the cannabis industry since the law was created, but there haven't been as many patient or consumer-friendly initiatives. There's a lack of protections for patients when it comes to gun rights, when it comes to employment, when it comes to DUI.
Because, for example, you cannot be a registered gun owner in the state of Pennsylvania and also have a medical card. And then, of course, employer rules can differ completely from industry to company to whatever. There are cases we've heard about, even here in Pittsburgh, where, like, say, for example, a firefighter lost his job because he was using. They've since changed their policy and he had a medical card. But it's been squishy in terms of how people are individually being dealt with in these cases.
Yeah, and then the DUI one is like if you're using cannabis, you can test positive for cannabis in your system, but not have any evidence of impairment, but you can still be charged and convicted of a DUI under Pennsylvania law. And I mean, we've seen some progress on the DUI one in particular, but that has stalled as well. And the employment one, yeah, I've written about that before, and it's sort of just, there are a lot of employers who hate the current system and a lot of employees who hate the current system because it just seems like the rules aren't clear. And, there have been some court cases, but there's nothing definitive about that. And we haven't seen progress on those patient protection things. I mean, we have seen the program expand, and there have been a number of things that have helped the program expand in terms of who can access medical marijuana. When the program first started, there was about maybe 16, 17 conditions. I think we're up to about 24 now. And the big one that we've written about before is anxiety disorders became a qualifying condition. That is now the leading condition in the program. The Medical Marijuana Advisory Board has recommended expanding who can certify patients for medical marijuana, particularly nurse practitioners.
Yeah, because right now it's physician only, and the physicians have to go through some steps to be able to do that. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, you have to be a physician, and you have to, I think it's like a 4-hour training. Yeah, and you have to register. And I think what they're proposing is that nurse practitioners could go through that 4-hour training and be registered for the program. And maybe that would have an impact on the cost of obtaining a medical marijuana card, which now costs, depending on if it's your first time or not, it can be like $50 to $200, somewhere in that ballpark.
Well, so who ultimately decides all of this here in Pennsylvania? Is it going to be our lawmakers who seem to have mixed feelings about this? Because like in Ohio, they got a ballot question. The voters got to choose.
Yeah, in Pennsylvania, we have like a huge barrier to ballot questions. It has to go through the legislature 2 consecutive sessions before it gets on the ballot. And so that seems, pretty much impossible in Pennsylvania that you would have.
We can't get something through a legislative session even once, let alone twice.
Yeah. So, I mean, for marijuana legalization, it seems impossible that the, Republican-controlled legislature would want to go down that path. I mean, it seems much more likely that if they would decide to do it, they would just do it themselves and get a sympathetic governor to sign on. We've heard, I mean, I think you had asked in the beginning and I didn't address it, but just sort of what the objections are. I mean, I think on the Republican side, there's the objection over just the inconsistency between federal and state law. And the argument they make is that just creates problems. And if it's federally illegal, legalizing it across the board is just going to create more problems. And some people argue that, some of these workplace rules, the federal gun rules, the DUI rules, that's all compounded by the federal access issue. And so they'd like to see the feds take action. And I think the other big argument is just that, that it's harmful is the argument, and that there's a lot of talk during these hearings about ways to prevent children from using. And I think there's some other concerns regarding DUIs. But I think the general idea is just that, the argument that it's not good to just encourage the entire population or to increase access to this for the entire population.
I mean, how much of that do you think, though, is like stigma of 50 years of us saying that it's worse for you in some way than, say alcohol, for example, which has been regulated and available, and we figured out how to keep children away from it by and large?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is just the fact that it has been illegal for so long, that if you put alcohol and cannabis side by side, I'm sure there are plenty of arguments for why alcohol is more harmful. But alcohol is currently legal. So I guess that's part of the argument. You can't put that genie back in the bottle, but cannabis, you don't have to release it.
Well, I guess as you zoom out a bit, how do you imagine changes at the federal level affecting any of this conversation here in Pennsylvania? A few weeks ago, the DOJ proposed rescheduling cannabis. It wouldn't legalize it in places where it's not. It wouldn't release anyone from jail who's already been prosecuted on a charge. But I don't know, could it have a warming effect on any lawmakers here who maybe still feel squishy about making the change?
Yeah, I think it could. I think whether that would be the deciding point, but I think it's sort of just the gradual. It's another step in that process and that gradual attitude shifting. And so if you saw a descheduling or a rescheduling, because right now it's in a category with some pretty. I don't have it in front of me. It's some pretty harsh drugs.
Yeah, it's in the same category as heroin. It would move it to a category similar to ketamine.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a big difference. And so, I think it would certainly take some of the talking point away. But if it's still, illegal at the federal level, then a lot of the arguments are still the same, that it shouldn't be legalized in Pennsylvania if it's illegal federally.
Well, and I guess near term, with Ohio coming online, I don't know, are we going to see police near state lines? What's the vibe on the eastern side of the state? Are Pittsburghers going to be popping over to Ohio and then I don't know, are the cops going to rally? I'm just thinking of what happened in the pandemic when Pittsburgh area people were running to West Virginia because our booze sale temporarily stopped completely.
Oh, yeah.
What's going to happen?
Yeah, I'm in York, PA. I drive down to Baltimore sometimes. There's a billboard, I've seen it, that talks about how it's the closest, it advertises the closest dispensary to that border. I've heard about billboards for New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And when I talked to an attorney in Pittsburgh about it, and, he told me that, you probably will see some people cross the border to buy cannabis. The big questions to look at is how good the prices are in Ohio.
Good point. Pittsburghers are so cheap.
Yeah. And then, in Ohio will have edibles allowed at its dispensaries, which Pennsylvania doesn't, which is another factor too. But it's hard or impossible to quantify how many people are going to be crossing the border to do that. And the risk is real if you go to Ohio, buy marijuana, come back, and if you happen to get pulled over and found with marijuana, then you can be charged with a crime in Pennsylvania. But this attorney wasn't expecting state police to be stationed on the border trying to catch residents that way. So, yeah, there's going to be some impact. And I guess the other thing, too, is we talk about people leaving Pennsylvania or losing business. The medical marijuana program is still growing. The sales are growing, month to month all the time, it seems like. The latest April figures were higher than they were the year before. So there is lost revenue, but it's hard to quantify.
And there's been a lot of complaints, too, that our medical system at present is just it's going to a lot of the same companies. A lot of them are very large. A lot of them are driven by white folks who are, able to build wealth in this way when we've incarcerated so many Black people and people of color for, effectively the same thing.
Yeah, and then that just reminds me, too, the decriminalization. Pennsylvania, we have not decriminalized small amount of marijuana possession. Some cities have taken action along that way, and municipalities, but across the state, we're one of a group of states that haven't decriminalized it. So that is something that advocates would like to see happen, sooner rather than later. Even if we don't legalize fully, there's a big hope and push, and I don't know how much progress there is, but that there would be efforts to decriminalize marijuana, which of course has a racial and justice component as well.
Absolutely. Ed, well, we will stay closely watching your great reporting on this. Thank you so much for all of your work with Spotlight PA.
Thank you. Great to be back.
That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. If you're liking the show, please tell a friend, rate us, leave us a nice review, and you can always get in touch via email. We're pittsburgh@citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Talk to you soon. I can hear you trying to talk, but I cannot hear what you're saying.